All right, friends, in today's tutorial, we are working towards this goal. We're going to take a picture of a bear and this couple at sunset and merge the bear into the image, starting with giving the bear a shadow and then working towards changing some colors and other effects on the bear using adjustment layers. Let's get started by going to our bear. Let's make it easy on ourselves and go to select subject, and we'll just do Control or Command C to copy, switch over to the sunset picture, Control or Command V to paste, and there's our bear. First step is going to be positioning. So let's get to work on that with a Control or Command T for transform. And I'm going to find a spot for the bear in the distance. We'll go with about like that. Okay, so we'll click on the check mark up on the top menu bar to agree with our placement. And let's go over to that layer. Look in the layers panel in the lower right. Click on the words layer 1, double click, and name it to bear. Then go to the background layer, double click, and name it to couple. Just makes it easier in referencing our layers. Okay, so switch back to the bear layer. And what I'd like you to do is click on the FX button and choose drop shadow. Now, at this point, your settings may be all over the place. I want you to move distance, spread, and size all the way to the left. And I want you to make the opacity 100% and click OK. You may see a slight outline around the bear. That's our drop shadow, but we're going to move it around. So no problem there. Next up, what we need to do is make this shadow its own layer. So look down in the layers panel again, lower right. Right click on drop shadow layer and choose create layer. And then click OK if you get this little warning box. Okay, now look at your layers panel. We've got bear and we have bear's drop shadow. So nice that we renamed that. For a moment, what I'd like to do is to click on the eyeball next to the bear layer and hide it. And now we can see the drop shadow a little more easily. First thing we're going to do is, once again, we're going to do some resizing. So let's do, on the bear's drop shadow layer, a Control or Command T, right click on that selection and go to flip vertical. And I'm just going to drag the bear down a little bit and then turn on the bear layer. Now, what I did was an effort to try and connect the bear and the bear layer, but you can see it's not working yet, and that's okay. Let's get back to the bear drop shadow layer and do a Control or Command T. And then we are going to go to Edit, Transform, and choose Skew. So now let's grab the corners and start stretching that bear shadow out. And I'm looking at the direction of the bear's shadow and doing my best to compare it to where the light is, which is center of the picture, and how it's impacting the shadows of the two people walking. And I really want this bear layer to go at an angle. It's not going straight on, right? It's at an angle. And I want it to stretch as best I can off the frame of the picture. Be patient with yourself during this part of the process. This is an interesting tool to use and well worth learning. So while we're here, once you're happy with skew, right click on it again and let's go to scale. And actually, the first thing I want to do is just see about stretching a little more. You may have to make different adjustments depending on the images you're working with. And then I'm going to go to right click again and rotate. And I just want to rotate it and reposition slightly. Now, take your time with this step because our next move somewhat finalizes this. We can always use history and go backwards, but it's better if you're happy with what you've got now. So you may be going back and forth between skew and scale a few times. I'm actually going to do a little rotate and move. And I'm doing my best to get these paws lined up. My last step, I'm going to grab the warp tool and just start to bend that shadow a little more. You may need to use different tools to make this match depending on the subjects that you're working with. But we want to get all this done before our next step, which is to add a layer mask. Okay, so once I'm happy, I'm going to click on the check mark up on the top menu bar. And I am going to I'm going to stay on the bear's drop shadow layer. And I am going to add a layer mask to that. So remember, that's lower right-hand corner. It's this rectangle with the circle in the middle. And now I've got a layer mask on Bear's drop shadow. And now at this point, what I want to do is work to make this fade just like the two shadows for the other folks are fading. So I'm going to click on gradient. Make sure the gradient is set to basics. Make sure the gradient is set to be a left-right gradient. And then I'm just going to grab my gradient line and drag it out. Now, you get to experiment at this point, friends. Your shadow may be different. I am doing the rough job of trying to make one side of the shadow a little bit darker than the other. And remember, you've got all these controls at your disposal, and it is okay if the shadow gradient tool, the line goes way off the edge of the picture. That's part of what we need to do. It's all good, friends. So I'm going to go with something like that. And so now I've got my gradient direction set the way I want. I'm going to go to opacity for the drop shadow layer, and I want to bring that down some because I want the texture of the pavement to show through my layer. So I'm happy with my positioning. I'm happy with my opacity. I just want to fine tune the edge. You may not have to do this, but I'm going to go for it. So I'm still on the layer mask. I'm going to go and grab the brush tool and I'll make the opacity like 50%. And I'm just going to work along the edge of this shadow and lighten it up a little bit. Not too much, just a little. Might come back and refine that later. We'll see. Okay, so next up is what we're going to do, which is a really interesting tool. It's a tool that lets us selectively blur. So I'm going to go click back on the thumbnail for the bear drop shadow. I'm not on the layer mask anymore. I move to the thumbnail and I'm going to go up to filter and go to blur gallery and choose field blur. And it's right now it's using previous settings, but what we want to do is just apply that to the bear layer by moving the slider back and forth. And if you look at their shadows, they're pretty defined when they get closer to the person, right? But as they get further away, they get a little more blurry. So I'm going to pin that one there. I'm going to take the pin and place another one out here and make this edge of the shadow way blurrier. And again, you can play with this by pinning multiple field blur adjustment layers wherever you want. Once you're okay with that, click the OK button at the top. All right, so we've blurred out our shadow a little bit. We've got it positioned pretty much where we want it. We're happy there. Um, what I want to do now is focus on adjusting the bear, our friend the bear, so that the colors and shadows of the bear itself better match the scene. Because right now my bear looks pretty copy pasted still, let's be honest. So I'm going to click on the bear layer. I've left the bear drop shadow layer. I'm going to click on the bear layer, click on FX for layer styles, and I would like to add a color overlay. Now, what I like to do in this case is to click on the swatch for the color picker next to bear overlay, grab my eyedropper and pick a color that I'd like to overlay the bear with. So I'm just going to look around and borrow from one of our people. And let's see how it does. So now if you look at it, and if I make the opacity 100%, ba-boom, right? But I don't want it to be 100%. I want it to have some of the tones and colors, but I don't want it to just be a blob. So you adjust the opacity to what works for you. We want to still be able to see the bear, but I want to definitely give it that overlay of that brownish orange color. Okay, so now I've got my overlay done for that. I'm going to add some more adjustment layers to this to finalize it. So let's go to the adjustment layer button. It looks like a black and white circle. Click on exposure. Now, if I use exposure now, it changes the whole picture, not what we want. However, if I hold down the Alt or Option key and I move my pointer down onto the exposure layer, see that little arrow? And I click. Now, my exposure changes are only going to affect the bear, not the rest. So I'm going to bring that exposure down. Now, you might also consider trying brightness, contrast, or curves, depending on if you need to make additional adjustments. The beauty of Photoshop, folks, is that I can click on the eyeball next to an adjustment layer and turn it off if I want to. Now, for my second to last step, I'm looking at the couple and they kind of, they're front lit, right? So they're backlit to us, to the scene. They have a little bit of a glow around them, and I'd like to add a little bit of a glow to the bear itself. So I'm going to click back to the bear layer. I'm going to go to FX. I'm going to go to outer glow. And I am going to go to my outer glow, and I'll once again click on the color picker, and I'm going to sample some good color for outer glow from the image that's in front of me. And I can see it happening on the bear. Play around with the opacity, play around with the noise. Each scene is going to be different, and you decide how much spread and size you want. Once you're happy with that, fantastic. Click OK. And we're going to make a separate layer for outer glow. So I'm going to right click on outer glow and I'm going to go to create layers. And so now Bear's outer glow has its own layer. The reason that I'm up to this is that I don't want its feet glowing. So I'm going to add in a layer mask. going to Controller Command plus zoom into my bear, and I just want to brush away some of that glow because physics, folks, the bear's feet would actually not be glowing. Now, for those of you who are artistic, you can better picture which edges of the bear might have a glow, which might not. You decide. This takes practice. Be patient with yourself. It's all good. All right, so now we've got a glowing bear with a nice backlit hue to him or her. Our final step, in my opinion, is I just want to blur the bear a little bit. See how that person way in the distance is blurry? Well, the bear is going to be a little bit blurry also. So let's switch back to the bear layer. We're going to go up to the top menu bar, click on Filter, go to Blur, and choose the one that starts with the letter G, Gaussian Blur. Now, if you can't see your bear, take the square to the bear and click it. And then you can play around with how much radius you want. For my position and placement, I had a good luck with somewhere between 3 and 6. If you go too far, the bear disappears. But you decide, you are the artist at work. And then click OK. And let's appreciate your sunset stroll picture, a wonderful couple while a bear heads home back to their den after a long day at work. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed making it, and have a great day.